All right, folks. Hey, welcome to another edition of XenTegra's Webinar Wednesday. We got a great topic today. We're going to be talking about Office 365 and FastTrack, and we got a lot of great guests today, so I'm excited. So let's jump in and have a good Wednesday. All right, and the cool thing is I'm actually coming to you live from Raleigh down in the Citrix office, so pretty cool. Citrix is actually hosting me today. So on the phone, I got myself. I'm Pete Downing. I'm the Chief Marketing and Technology Officer for XenTegra. For those who have attended these in the past, you know, I kind of act like the moderator and host. Also on the phone, I got Trevor Manzel, who is our VP/CTO of our MSP business, our managed service provider business. So we're going to be talking about that today, and you're going to want to hear about that because we have a lot of cool things going on. Now, what's really cool is, you know what, we recognize that, you know, we can't do everything. And we have a great partner on the phone in XenTegra. And XenTegra is great because their model is to help partners like us scale out and focus on things like Office 365, our topic today. So they're going to talk about how they help us and how they can help you take advantage of some of the stuff around Office 365, and also talk about topics where you might not be thinking about your Office 365 deployments. And I'm really honored and lucky to have two gentlemen on the phone, Jody and Andy. Jody's the president of the Americas, and Andy is the practice manager, really smart guy. So I'm excited to have these guys on the phone today. They're going to take us through, you know, what is XenTegra, how they work with Office 365. We have a lot of great panel questions. We're going to treat this very, you know, podcasty today, and we're going to ask, you know, a lot of questions, and they're going to answer them. And if you guys have questions, you definitely want to get them out there. So use the Q&A dialogue as well. So thank you for joining us, Jody and Andy, today. Honored to have you guys on. All right, so our agenda is pretty easy today. We're going to go through. I like to do polls. So if you guys have done these in the past, you know I love polls. It helps us level set, you know, the topics, and gives us some food for thought as we go through the day today. And then we're going to go through, you know, Office 365, you know, give you a little overview on what is FastTrack. But through that, we're also going to ask a lot of cool questions and do a panel discussion. So I have a lot of questions that I'm going to throw out there, and, you know, Jody, Andy, and Trevor are going to, you know, answer them, and we're going to treat this kind of very podcasty. It's going to be fun. So, and then at the end, we'll do a really quick recap on, you know, how XenTegra can help you with your Office 365 deployments. And then finally, if you have any questions, you definitely want to get them out there, because, hey, they get recorded and we actually have them and we can answer them after the fact. So if we can't get to your question, don't worry, we'll get you an answer. All right, so just a little bit of housekeeping today. We are on a GoToWebinar. You guys are all on mute. And again, if you want to ask a live question at the end, I can unmute you. Some people like doing that, so don't worry. If you chat me or raise your hand, definitely let me know. And then finally, there is a Q&A dialogue. I am going to be watching that. So if you have a question, definitely throw the question out there, and we can answer it in the context that it's being asked. So definitely throw your questions out there throughout the day today. All right, so here's a couple polls that I want to throw out there. And again, these help us level set, you know, the content today, and helps us make sure that we're answering your questions and hitting upon some of the issues that are out there. So the first question is are you using Microsoft Office 365 today? And I'm going to launch it, and you guys, you know, take a minute to answer it, and you know, definitely you know, answer. I can't see who's answering it. It's anonymous right now, so don't worry. All right, and again, this helps us cater the conversation to you guys and make sure we hit key points. So I'll give about a couple more seconds, try to get to 75%, and get a couple more votes. Going once, going twice, going three times, and we'll share it. All right, so we got a good mix of on-prem Exchange and Exchange Online. So Andy and Jody are going to talk a little bit about how we can help with those two scenarios around archiving, backup, etc. We have a lot of people, you know, good chunky deploying Office 365, so we can talk about how we can help XenTegra and XenTegra, and then also not on the it's no on the radar. We can help you figure out how you fast track that and get it into your enterprise. So it's pretty cool to see this split. So good data there. All right, so let's talk in the next question. How many Office 365 users are in your organization? And again, I segmented this out based on our friendly partner Citrix, because that's how they segment them out, so we can align it to our selling motion. So give you guys a couple seconds on this. Let's try to get at least 75%. So it's going once, going twice. All right, so we have a pretty good spread here. Pretty surprising. So good. We have a lot of mid-market SMB. We got a lot of commercial, and we got a couple of you guys in the 5,000 plus category. So great. Thanks for jumping on, and we're excited to see how we can help you guys. All right, and then the final question: what type of email archiving do you have? And again, if you don't know, just say, hey, I'm not sure, and that's where we're going to educate you today. So, and if you do know, definitely put it down, and we're going to talk a little bit about this today and how we can help you. So give you guys a couple seconds. And again, if you don't know, don't be afraid. I can't see you. It's better to say no, and you'll walk out of here with some food for thought. So going once, going twice. All right, so we'll share this. So we got a good spread. Again, lower end of the spectrum here, we got 30% of you doing exchange in-place archiving, and then we got another 45% using an archiving solution. So we're going to cover a little bit of that topic today and give you some food for thought. All right, so thank you for taking part in those polls. And again, those polls help us kind of make sure we're going to hit your kind of the topics today. All right, so with that, what I'm going to do is pass over to Jody and Andy, and they're going to jump into kind of a little overview on XenTegra, and then we're going to start talking about a couple panel discussions. So, I'll go to the first slide, guys, and you can tell me when you want me to go to the next slide. So, Andy and Jody, thanks for joining and welcome.
Great, thanks, Pete. Thanks everybody for joining this morning. Excited to be here. So I'll just spend a couple of minutes here, give you the real high level overview on XenTegra. We can follow up with anybody that wants more detail. But as Pete alluded to, we have a pretty unique business model in the sense that we never transact directly with end users like yourselves. We were born and will always be specifically focused on partners like XenTegra. And as Pete mentioned, partners struggle sometimes with trying to be all things to all people. I spent a lot of years on your side of the business, the client side of the business, and working with a lot of partners. And that struggle makes it hard for them to actually add value. And so in the way that a customer needs it and wants it. So we formed our organization to actually help partners like that, make it easier for them to scale out and scale up with different technologies and be able to backfill when they don't have enough bench to be able to support their customers effectively. And it's been a really successful business for us. So we've been around for 9 years now. We're a global organization headquartered out of Sydney, Australia. My name's Jody, and I run the Americas. We are a Microsoft Gold partner. And we were one of the original FastTrack partners. And if you don't know what FastTrack is, we're going to get into that a little bit. So we'll walk you through what that is, and it'll give you a little more insight into our level of relationship with Microsoft and the technical skills and capabilities and experience that we have. So that's the high level on XenTegra. Anybody has any other questions, please just with regards to us or anything else, please just throw them in the question center and go to webinar. And I will now hand off to Andy.
All right, great. Thanks, Jody. As Jody mentioned, actually, as Pete had mentioned, I'm Andy Sulak, Practice Manager for the Americas with XenTegra. And I just want to kind of take you through the modern workplace journey real quick, or really what I should call it is modern workplace bingo. Because kind of depending on where you're at, that's how the chips kind of fall, and then there's always a direction to move in. So kind of starting from the left, there's kind of the client server legacy on-prem systems that we're used to and still might have. Moving all the way to the right, where it's to the productive, efficient workplace, which is now the terminology for Microsoft, is modern workplace as a whole. So taking into account the pieces that are within that, across Office, desktop, and then security, you might still have Exchange on-prem, Windows 7, maybe using SCCM, maybe not any deployment technologies, or maybe you already are using OneDrive, or there are you know, staff within your organizations that are using OneDrive on Windows 10, but then also, you know, taking advantage of Intune for mobile device management. The point being, wherever you're at within this journey, or wherever the chips are covering from a bingo perspective, we can take you to the next part, the next piece, but then also put together a roadmap for, hey, where are you at? Where do you need to get to? What makes sense in the next 3 months, the next year, the next 2 years, especially keeping in mind some of the product and support end of life that are coming up around Windows 7, certain versions of Exchange, things like that, as well as just the ability to uplift to using more of these pieces as software as a service, not having to manage the infrastructure anymore, not have to manage the uptime, just having it as more of a service within your environment versus another more hardware and software to update and upgrade. So.
Yeah, and I'll just add to this. This is Jody. I'll add a little bit. I think that the real point of this slide is important for you to take away is there's no right answer on where to start in this journey. The pace at which technology is being developed and adopted is increasing, as we all know, on a very rapid pace and exponentially as years go by. And what we find with customers is that an individual customer starts at every different place on this screen. As Andy mentioned, it might be Windows 10, it might be Teams, it might be OneDrive. There's no right answer. It's really about what is most important to your business, what is most important to your users' productivity. And then, of course, wherever you do start, doing that effectively, covering the security effectively, and really focusing on productivity. And we help customers across the board in the modern workplace.
Cool. So it sounds like we want to jump into the first question, right, guys?
Yep.
All right. So the first question, so what are the risks? What risk are there with migrating to Office 365? Probably a common question customers ask, right?
Yeah, that is pretty common. I think mostly, as far as the risk of data loss or anything like that, that is pretty much nil. I've been in IT long enough to say that to not say that would never happen, but with the migration techniques, the tools provided by Microsoft or third party, and the way even the migration happens with actually a synchronize that occurs first and then a cutover. So at all times until something's cut over, there's no removal of, and we're talking about mail or any other assets within that. So the risks from a technical perspective are fairly low. It's more the risk that we run into is setting expectations, making sure that there's proper planning, testing, then piloting, a good stepwise approach where we do all the planning and testing up front so that the actual production migration is a non-issue. So they understand the timelines, the effect to the network, what other applications might be integrated and affected. But with a proper approach to migration, not really a big deal, but taking it very seriously, because it is that business critical part of your environment that of course goes mission critical anytime anything's down, offline, or hard to access. So that's mainly what we see on that.
Cool. Yep. And just a kind of an impromptu question. So how do you guys answer the question around, like, I get a lot of healthcare customers who say, oh, it's not ready for healthcare, or government customers. Is there an answer for those type of customers as well, with like HIPAA and the different certifications you have to have in order to use cloud?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, Microsoft with Office 365 on Azure has possibly the most security certifications across the different industry standards. So at this point, we were talking, 3+ years ago, that'd be a little bit different story, probably more in the government realm. But from a HIPAA perspective, for SOX compliance, any of the other, I shouldn't say any, but most other regulations, they're actually at or exceed a lot of the standards. Frankly, more so than than a lot of on-prem data centers do right now. So
Cool.
Yep.
Cool. And any other comments, Jody, or do you want to think we
Yeah,
jump?
no, that's a great impromptu question, Pete. Thanks. And I'll just add to the risk. I think the other risk that we see commonly is user expectation management and user experience. That is, the migration, we have an approach that's been developed over years and hundreds, if not thousands of projects. So we're very, very good at that. But what we see is in that process, it's absolutely critical to communicate directly and often with the users. So number one in the planning stage is really understanding what how important the user experience is to your particular organization. Two, what that means. What are they used to seeing today? How do they access mail? How do they access archives? Those types of things. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. And then managing that. And we provide lots of communication templates and that customers can send directly to the customers. We can even schedule those. So as you approach a migration, there's a regular automated cadence that's going out to your users. Here's what you can expect. Here's what you specifically need to do. And here's in the morning you come in. Here's what's different. And here's how you access it. So that's really critical because the most important part about any type of migration is managing that user experience and giving them the opportunity to remain productive and sort of reduce the anxiety that just comes with natural change.
Cool. And we got our first question from Charlene. Hopefully I said your name right. Around the whole HIPAA conversation, she asked, for HIPAA, do you need Azure Premium for DLP in particular?
No, for HIPAA in general, that's not required unless there's some specific area. I know unless there's some specific areas that require it. So I hate answering with it depends. But from HIPAA in general, that's not required today. But again, that's continuously evolving, and based on the sensitivity of the data, it's definitely best practice right now, but it's not a hard requirement.
All right, awesome. So let's jump to the next question. All right, so what are the main pitfalls you see when organizations are migrating to Office 365? And you kind of maybe talked a little bit about this, but I think you're going to get a more detail now.
Yeah, so definitely as Jody mentioned, the user experience, user expectations, as well as I mentioned, the planning and testing are a big piece of this. I think what we run into, and as part of our migration methodology, is to ensure that we expect it and remediate it, is really getting a consistent environment. It's not just we're going to talk specifically about Exchange, just as a good example, not just making sure that the Exchange email system is ready for migration, but that Active Directory is cleaned up, and there's certain artifacts that creep into the environment over time. If you just brought up Active Directory in the last year or two, hey, congratulations. It's probably pretty clean, but most Active Directories have been in the trenches for a while. So mergers and acquisition, upgrades, migrations with an AD can leave, I like to call them, I think it's polite to call them artifacts, or we can also say it's junk that might get left in there that we definitely want to find and remediate beforehand. And I say this is a pitfall because I think there's many organizations that say, hey, well, we're just ready to go. So there's some tools here. We'll just start migrating. And without actually going through running certain tools, provided by Microsoft to make sure that everything's prepped, things that need to be remediated and cleaned up are beforehand. Again, more of that planning, testing, then piloting before you actually move into the migration where you're going to have the most user impact, because you are making a change to the environment. So ensuring that not just Exchange, but everything else that touches that are part of it as well. Another piece I would say would be, since now you're going from on-prem to a cloud provider, an Azure tenant for Office 365, it's now outside of your environment. So network connectivity latency, things like that, which may have not been an issue when your data center is either maybe right next to you or on a separate network. That just all needs to be taken into account. It isn't a reason to shy away from it, but during the testing and piloting that we do, as an example, we ensure that we get good data from that so that we can determine, okay, well, how's this going to affect the migration, but then how is this going to affect user experience going forward? And there's a number of tools and ways to mitigate that. It's not always just saying, well, just buy a bigger pipe to the internet. There are other technologies that also help maintain that same on-prem experience once you're in Office 365.
Cool. And anything to add, Jody or Trevor? Do you have any experiences from your point of view? Or?
Yeah, no, so Andy, one of the things that I think Andy just brought up is, around connectivity. And I think we see this regularly because it's not just with Office 365, but it's with any, moving to any cloud service, whether it's Salesforce.com, a lot of networks from the past on-prem world are, backhauling, branch traffic and other traffic back into a main data center and then back up and out to the internet. And so with just like any other cloud project, looking at the connectivity, making sure that, for best user experience, you're getting that user to the front door of that cloud service as quick as possible. And there's different ways to achieve that. One of the Citrix and Microsoft work together on the virtual WAN and SD-WAN solution that have a lot of integration in specifically around Office and Office 365 and Azure. But there's obviously other solutions out there to that address this issue. But it's definitely something to think about for sure.
Yeah. All right. So another good question, John Decker, who we just talked to him this week. We have been an on-site, and I don't know the acronym, so maybe you guys do, or maybe it's another hosting company. So we've been an on-site DAG enabled Exchange customer with GSLB enabled for auto failover. So he's asking, hey, can you sell me on the benefits of going to Exchange Online, considering user experience, like it will take a hit even at the expense of hops that local IT needs to get through to make it as good as what it was like on-prem. And I can add some color on this around like non-persistent desktops, things like that, things like FS Logics. But yeah, let's answer the first part of that question is what's the benefits of going to Exchange Online, I guess.
I think the main benefits going to Exchange Online are to take advantage of Microsoft's SLA uptime, the fact that they do have data centers across the globe that can be failed over, between that's part of the way that they do their replication and keep the uptime. So if you're in a highly available environment right now, matching that within the Azure Office 365 landscape, I would say is pretty easy to do unless there's very, very specific requirements for that. And then the other part of it being that there's no more management of the infrastructure. As updates come out, Microsoft is handling all that on the back end. So worrying about storage, worrying about patching, worried about even upgrading as new releases and fixes are coming out. That's handled by Microsoft by going to Office 365, really taking that out of the equation and having it as more of a service.
Cool. And I'll throw some color, John, on the user experience. So when you do go to Exchange Online, the OST file, that becomes an issue. And there's ways to mitigate that, especially in the VDI world or even the server-based computing world of XenApp or virtual apps, VDI, virtual desktops. And one of our favorite products, and I think XenTegra probably agrees, is FS Logics, which is now owned by Microsoft coincidentally now, and they help alleviate that by taking the OST file, putting it into a VHD, and therefore making it accessible, in a non-persisted scenario. And you can even you could use it on an physical desktop as well. A little more challenging, but again, that's where you can improve the user experience around OST, OneDrive search, Exchange search, etc. So that, just to add color to that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's huge, Pete. Highly recommended for anyone using Citrix and going to Office 365.
Cool. All right, so let's jump into the next question because we have a lot of good questions going on. And again, audience, please ask questions. The questions help us add value to what we're talking about. So don't hesitate to ask questions. All right, so let's talk about archiving. So how about when email archives are involved? So I get tag on to the previous question. So I think we're going to dive a little bit more into archiving. So I'll let you guys kind of talk about that. So I guess take this question and when they're migrating, what happens when archiving is involved now?
Yeah, and it was good to see the poll numbers on that too. So it sounds like a number of you have third-party archiving solutions. Archives, moving email archives at the time that primary mail is moved is pretty complex, and quite frankly, there's not a whole lot of partners out there globally that really know how to do this effectively. And when I say effectively, I mean doing it in a way that you can demonstrate chain of custody, which is very important from a regulatory perspective, and probably most importantly is maintaining an effective user experience. That's key. So some of the things that need to be considered when moving archives is, first, what's the migration path for the live mail, right? So for your primary mail migration, how's that going to work? Are we doing hybrid, cut over time? Are we doing a hard cut where we're synchronizing mail and then doing a hard cut over a weekend? What does that look like? Because depending on the answer to that, it's important that we align the archive migration with that experience. And that's critically important if your organization considers user experience to be important. And I find very few organizations today that don't consider that to be a primary importance. So that's really important, and we work through that with you to identify the best path. Another consideration is what is the archiving policy that you have today, and how do users access those archives? The answer to those questions determines whether the archives go into their primary mailbox in Office 365 or into their online archive. And if you don't know this already, with Office 365 comes an online archive at no cost. So we help a lot of organizations eliminate the cost of these third-party archives. Because today, a few years ago, Microsoft wasn't quite there, particularly from a discovery process. But today, they're well in line with what we find to be about 95% of the customers out there. The online archive, the discovery process, e-discovery process within Microsoft Office 365 is sufficient and works really well. So if you have a third-party archive, that should be interesting to you because, as you know, those can be very expensive solutions. So the ROI on that type of migration becomes fairly efficient and effective. So another piece that you need to consider is, are you willing to accept users not having access to those archives for some period of time? We have customers that don't allow users access to the archives at all. We have most customers allowed some level of access to those archives. The answer to that question is whether you're willing to accept them not having access. That determines when the archives move, right? Do we move the archives ahead of the primary mail and provide access via the archive, the online archive, or do we need to move them after because we're less concerned about user access and we can move the primary mail and make sure the user experience is solid there and then migrate archives? Or what we see most often is managing that together so that when we batch those migrations in a hybrid cutover, we're migrating primary mail and migrating archive mail at the same time. So there's no right answer to those. The approach and methodology becomes a little bit different, but those are key questions, and that's part of what we do in our engagements to understand exactly what the business requirements are. But those are key questions. And the last one I would say is really important, and one that a lot of organizations we find when we come in to clean things up is they haven't thought about, and that's batch sizing. We see a lot of organizations focus on trying to move as many users in an individual batch as possible. And while we can move and have moved thousands of users at a time in an individual batch, the question that's most important is, what can your help desk handle? Because while these migrations typically go very, very well, we all know that things can go wrong, and we need to plan for the worst. And so what I mean by that is, what typically we'll ask in part of our design and approach sessions is, what is your help desk? What's a typical number of tickets that your help desk has in a given day? What's their peak? What's their low? What can they handle? So that's really what we want to deal with. If you want to migrate 500 users in a single batch, but your help desk can really only handle about 50 or 100 calls a day, then we'd want to really be careful of that and analyze that and discuss that and understand what those risks are. Because if something does go wrong, your help desk can be inundated, and therefore your user experience has really declined. And of course, any batch failure has a political impact in the organization. So that's another key consideration.
Cool. And one cool thing to add there is around help desk. One of the things we can do as XenTegra is offload some of that help desk and help you guys manage that through our MSP. So we'll kind of cap that off towards the end, but something to put in the back of your mind, folks, as we go through here. Anything else to add, Jody, or do you want to jump into the next question?
Yeah, if there's no questions, go ahead and jump forward.
All right. So how does Microsoft back up data in Office 365? I think everybody wonders this, and I actually wonder this myself. I think I'm going to learn something new today.
All right, great. So how Microsoft, once you have assets up in Office 365, they are replicated, and I think I alluded to this earlier. They're replicated for uptime so that they can meet the high availability SLAs. So they essentially are doing a form of snapshot so that they can revert back to these replicas. They either can bring them up in a different region or even bring them up in the same region, depending on what's needed for the uptime. But it's not a backup that we typically think of as far as backup and recovery. In the case where I think what happens a lot is there's a lot of our customer conversations, they say, well, once it's in Office 365, it's backed up and it's protected. It is protected, but it's not backed up in the sense that if you wanted to recover a single calendar item from 3 days ago, or pull something from 2 weeks ago, or possibly longer, that's not available. If you call Microsoft through a manual process, they can take the latest replica and mount it so that you can actually then manually go in, find what you need, dump it out to a PST, then re-import it back into your system. It's a pretty lengthy and arduous process. And again, it's only to what that last replica was. You can't say like, well, I'm going to go back to the second. It doesn't work that way. So it's really not backed up, but it is protected. I want to be clear on that. That's why we actually also offer backup as a service. So if you've already migrated, that's something that can be turned on, or during a migration, we want to have that backed up. So we have a cloud-to-cloud backup as a service that really matches the same goal that you have with going Office 365. Don't have to worry about the infrastructure, don't have to manage it, don't have to worry about the storage. Everything's backed up 6 times a day, as granular restores as you want to do. It can be a single message, a single contact, all the way up to folders, mailboxes, or an entire organization. Just point and click. So I always like to clear that one up just to make sure that there's a good understanding of what the quote-unquote backup is in Office 365.
Yeah, and I'll just add, I think Microsoft didn't change their philosophy with Exchange and backup and recovery. So most, if not all, customers that have Exchange on premises have some sort of third-party backup and recovery solution associated with Exchange. Microsoft's approach to Office 365 in that respect was exactly the same. So if you want to have the ability and need to have the ability to recover quickly a mailbox, an individual item, OneDrive, whatever the case may be, you need to have a third-party solution to do that in Office 365.
Cool.
Yep. Very good point.
Yeah, and John Deckard, thanks for the questions, by the way. I love them. He's asking how often does I'm guessing Microsoft Snap, and then he says what the RP. I don't know what that means. So
Probably,
John,
yeah. So I can take that one. So it's twice a day. If it's what recovery RP, that's recovery point. Just consider it every 12 hours. So that's essentially the RP that you're looking at, again, with the manual process of actually taking time to actually call them and log a ticket for any of that recovery to occur.
cool. Yeah, and he said recovery point. So
yeah,
cool. All right. So next question. All right, so it's a very probably common question we get for customers. Our Exchange environment is very stable. Why should we migrate to Office 365? I'm guessing a lot of these people that are on the fence right now or in flux. This is a great question to answer.
Yeah. So it comes down to I'd say two main areas for this. One is to take your existing email environment and make it a service. In the case where you don't have to manage it, you don't have to worry about the hardware, the software, the the storage, or any of the backend systems, and then the maintenance as well as the upgrades and updates. You still manage it, obviously, adding users, making changes, changes needed for your environment, but you essentially don't have to worry about the technical pieces from the perspective of actually running the infrastructure anymore. Turns it into a service and is in line with where Microsoft's going roadmap wise. The next question will kind of address that, so I won't say too much on that. But the other part of it being the integration with other tools within Office 365 will drive more towards using the product online. So what I mean by that is integration between Exchange and SharePoint and OneDrive. A lot of the functionality that you can get from using some of the analytics tools that they're adding to Office 365, things like that, are only available once you move up into the cloud. So you really take advantage of the full licensing that you're already paying for, have the infrastructure in the cloud, and then the integration and ease of access. That's what's being developed. So there's still on-prem versions that are being developed and supported, but I would say a bulk of the resources in any of these technologies for collaboration, Exchange, SharePoint, Teams, OneDrive, Power BI, Planner, all the other things in that umbrella of Office 365, they're being added into that. So there's much more functionality that's being added at that level, while the existing on-prem tools are being developed and supported, but definitely not at the cadence, and that's not the focus going forward. Any questions on that?
I'm looking right now. There's a question on. I'm waiting on a follow on. So not pertinent to this question. So anything else to add, guys, or do you want me to go to the next question?
Yeah, go ahead and move on, Pete.
Yeah.
I want to leave some time for people for Q&A.
Yeah. So this is a good one too. So Microsoft has released Microsoft Exchange 2019. Should we just stay on-prem with our email?
And that's a dovetail into the last question, which is because I think for a long time, I heard this too, like, Exchange 2016, that's the last version of Exchange that they're going to release. You got to go to Office 365. Hey, surprise everybody, here's Exchange 2019. So, or surprise to some, I should say. In that case, like, okay, well, so they're continuing their roadmap for on-prem. So maybe we should just stick with that. And if it's the right tool for the job, I'm not going to say no. Doesn't mean that you have to go to Office 365, but from the perspective of if it's an actual requirement to stay on-prem for either very specific application integrations or possibly certain environments that just need to maintain data within their data centers, specific reasons, I'd say, yeah, you absolutely can stay. And because of that is a reason why Exchange 19 came out, because they weren't at the point where they could set the end of life dates for 2016 and say like, okay, everybody's into the cloud after that. So it's really more about you can, but to be honest, going back to some of the risks and the pitfalls, most of what we found in the migration projects is when there's an environment that's just kind of left on life support, and then when we go to migrate or make a change to it, it becomes a huge issue. So from kind of a future proofing perspective, moving in the direction of where things are going, and taking advantage of more and more that's being added to the licensing you're already paying for is an important piece of it. So I would say stay on-prem, but again, only if there's specific requirements for that, because everything else is moving to the cloud. And the benefits and the value are there too, not just because it's cloud. So
cool. And Trevor, just to maybe add a little more context here, I'm assuming as part of our MSP, we can also do a managed offering with this as well, right? Exchange, if we had to host Exchange 2019.
We don't currently offer that. But yeah, I think we're kind of steering away. We can do managed on-prem, so we have the managed services. So if they had it on-prem, we could manage it, but we don't host in our data center Exchange. So if that makes sense.
Cool. All right. Anything else, Jody, Andy?
Nope.
This one?
Nope.
All right. All right. So I heard that Microsoft FastTrack will migrate us to Office 365 for free. Why not just use that? And I think you want me to go to the next slide as well as context.
Yeah, that'd be great.
All right. So we're going to talk about FastTrack. All right, guys.
Probably the easiest way to answer that question is actually just help people understand what FastTrack is. We hear oftentimes that question's there because of what we hear from customers quite a bit. There's a misunderstanding about what FastTrack actually is. FastTrack is a fantastic program that Microsoft created a few years back. It is it's Microsoft funded, and they specifically created it to help customers more rapidly and effectively adopt solutions, cloud solutions in particular. And in the Office 365 space, across most of the products there, certainly Exchange, SharePoint, Teams, OneDrive for Business, all of those, as well as others, there's a program. This program is called FastTrack. We were one of the original 6 FastTrack partners in the world. And we've influenced quite a bit, as you can see on the slide there, well over now 8 petabytes of data into Office 365 as part of FastTrack. So what is FastTrack? There are 2 parts to it. One is the onboarding. And onboarding is free telephone-based consulting that helps you understand what it is that you need to do in your environment in order to prepare for migration. So Andy was talking earlier about some of the things that we find in Active Directory and around identity. We're gonna run some tools. We're gonna work with you internally and on the phone, remotely with you to identify specifically and provide a very prioritized list of actions. Here's what needs to be done. So you're gonna have a lot of clarity on what needs to take place in order to prepare for migration. Now, that service is available to any organization that has more than 150 licenses. And I know the slide says users, but it's important to understand 150 licenses for Office 365. That service is available. And we are a FastTrack partner, so you can just engage with XenTegra and we'll help you figure out how to make that happen. It's very, very simple, though. The second part of FastTrack, and that second part is available to organizations with 500 users or more, is the actual migration of mailboxes. And that is what a lot of people hear about in the sense of free migration. Now, Microsoft has and maintains in India a global migration fast-track center. And that is a group of individuals and processes that are literally just taking mailboxes in batches that are provided to them from on-premises directly into Office 365. It is the actual migration task. But it's important to understand that is a process center. So they don't have a whole lot of exceptions. They operate on rules. So what that means in migrations for customers that don't have us engaged in FastTrack is you will provide the batch to the global FastTrack center. They will then process that batch. And if something goes wrong with an individual mailbox or groups of mailboxes or with the batch, they're just going to kick that back to you. And they may or may not provide the insight that you need in order to fix whatever the problem is in order to then complete the migration successfully. And so that can become a real problem, obviously. So one of the things that we do as a FastTrack partner is we'll manage that with you. So in the onboarding process, we're going to be very clear with you and provide a report. Here's specifically what you need to do, and you can go and do that. If you need help doing that, we can assist you with that. And then with the actual migration time, when the batch takes place, we're working directly with you, preparing those batches. We're interfacing with the global migration center so that when there is an issue, if there is an issue, they're now communicating with our team. We're correcting that if we can, and if not, we're then coming back to you as a customer and saying, hey, here's what needs to be done very specifically, and working to make that go as cleanly as possible.
Sweet. So folks, you have a lot of experts on the phone. So again, if you have any questions at all, definitely ask. If you have any questions around FastTrack, definitely ask. If it hits you after the fact, we're going to give you our emails and you can reach out to us. But again, you can see we have a lot of good, smart people on the phone, and definitely hit us up with any questions you have around anything Office 365. So anything else, Jody, on this slide, or do you want to move into the next segment?
Yep. No, I'm good.
All right, cool. All right, so really quick, I just want to, I like to cap off the webinars on who is XenTegra. So if you're new to XenTegra, just give you an idea of what we can do to help you with Office 365. If you're already a customer, thank you. And if you have attended our webinars in the past, thank you for coming back. But again, you have a lot of smart people on the phone today. So if you have any questions around Office 365, our MSP, et cetera, definitely shoot those out now into the Q&A dialogue, and we'll do a final check once I get through this next segment. So this is Andy, our CEO, and Andy built XenTegra with two things in mind. One, he wanted to form true partnerships, and two, he wanted to help enable our customer base. And that's really our core tenet of XenTegra. We do a lot of enablement. So if you don't know, we do a lot of hands-on workshops on Citrix products, Avanti products, et cetera. And if you go to XenTegra.com/events, you can see all the cool events we do. And I run a lot of them now. So for example, tomorrow I have a ADC app firewall workshop. And then on Friday, I have an app layering workshop. So if you're interested, I still have some spots available. Again, we were selected as Partner of the Year for Citrix. So we are top national platinum Citrix partner, as well as a Microsoft Gold partner and a Microsoft Cloud Solutions Provider partner. So we can resell Office 365 as well as Azure. And Trevor, if you have any questions around that, I got Trevor on the phone. He runs our MSP, another smart guy. So if you have any questions around Azure, and how that works, or how to access Office 365 licensing, we can help you with that. So again, what are the things you want to think about today? All right. So first off, if you are in the process of FastTrack or you are on the cusp of doing it, definitely reach out to us. We can help you, and we can get you on track and take advantage of it, right? But if you're in the process of considering Office 365, we can help you with demo licenses. We can help you get potentially funded or free POCs with Office 365, Citrix, and Azure. So again, reach out to us. If you're looking at Azure and you're looking at Citrix Cloud plus Office 365, we might be able to get some monies to help you POC this. And then finally, we can help you and do an O365 assessment. So if you're not sure, or you're kind of stuck in the mud and you're trying to figure out how to move forward or move faster, we can come in and do an assessment for you guys and get you ahead of the curve and get you back on track. So those are some of the things you want to think about, as you exit the webinar today. And then finally, yes, we do have a managed service offering. And Trevor, I'm gonna let you chime in here because this is your baby. So if you want to take a couple minutes just to talk about the managed services and what we can do for our customers.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, obviously Citrix and Microsoft are two strategic partnerships. And when we talk about managed services, as part of XenTegra, it really on one end of the scale, we can come in and provide a full managed service for your whole Citrix and Microsoft environment. Okay, so that's on one spectrum. If you're looking, hey, I've got so many things on my plate technology-wise. I just want to go ahead and essentially outsource my Citrix department to XenTegra. That is something that we focus on and do really well. A lot of managed service providers, go wide and try to be all things to all people, and that, as a company, even on the consulting side, that's not what we're about. We're about doing what we choose to do, and we do it really well. So if you've got if it's, you're delivering a virtual workspace, you're doing it on-prem or in Azure or on another cloud, we absolutely can come in and help you, from a managed services perspective. And then on the other end of the scale of that, we can come in and just say you just want an insurance policy of sorts, someone to call 24/7, a level 3 person when you need it, right? So you might not need, you've got your Citrix team in place, but you want to have a specialist to be able to call into. We have support agreements for that, prepaid blocks of hours that you can purchase, and it's a pretty low cost, low entry point for that kind of service. So, but yeah, so there's a lot of in between there. We'll probably need to do another webinar and kind of cover off some of those things and how we execute these particular services. But yeah.
Thanks for that, Trevor. And Trevor and I are working on a couple other webinars. We're going to be focused on different topics around our MSP practice on ways we can help you. But just to give you an idea, here's a kind of a snapshot of some of the customers here. We have we cover a lot of different verticals, and we cover a wide range of customers. No customer is too big, and no customer is too small for us. In fact, that's why I'm sitting in Citrix right now, because I'm working with the SMB team and the commercial team to strategize on how we can serve that customer base a lot better. And just to call out a few customers, CMP is a great customer. They just got innovation selected as an innovation finalist for Citrix at Summit recently. They're our customer. They're a full MSP customer. So they're a great example of how XenTegra can help you leverage our MSP practice. And again, take advantage of our events. All right. So go to XenTegra.com/events. We do a lot of hands-on workshops with labs, technical training, webinars, and soon I'm going to be putting up some podcasts. So keep an eye out for that. And again, one cool thing we do, and this is unique to XenTegra and the partner community, if you have a renewal coming up, reach out to us. The reason why, we can take the renewal dollars that you use for Citrix, we're going to give you a rebate, and we're going to help you get to Synergy. That said, if you just want to go to Synergy, you already renewed, we can give you $200 off the price of the passes today, and you have until tomorrow to get the early bird special. And again, the $200 will come off the early bird price as well. So if you're interested in getting to Synergy, definitely reach out to myself or your counterpart that you're working with here at XenTegra, and we can talk to you about how we can get you to Synergy in Atlanta this year. We're going to have an awesome dinner. We're going to have some cool events. We're going to have Centra come on and do some other stuff while we're there. So definitely want to take advantage of this promo. And if you're a government customer, we're even taking $200 off the government rate. So just to give you some food for thought. All right, so I'm going to look at the Q&A dialogue really quick. I think a couple good questions came in. I want to make sure I answer them. And we have we got a lot of good questions. So I'll try to if we don't get to your question, we will answer them. So I'm going to start with George's question. So good question, George. So he said, and Andy, Jody, maybe for you guys, what are the downsides of performing slow migrations, meaning migration of small groups at a time over a period of time?
Yeah, it's a good question. Probably the biggest thing is, I would say, a lack of continuity, and I'll give you an example with that. So one thing to be aware of, and that we always plan out and find, are groups of staff within your organization that have delegate permissions and share calendars, things like that. Once a mailbox gets migrated up to Office 365, that connection is severed. So free busy information is still available. That's not an issue. But actually being able to see the shared calendars, getting access to those can be an issue. Part of our approach is to actually find that, and as Jody was talking about batching earlier, set up the batches so that users that have similar access or need to work together would be moved at the same time. So that comes into play with that. That's probably the biggest thing to watch out for. But also, you know, if you just want to do kind of a handful here, a handful there, it just drags out the migration, and then you do have, you know, more the who has and who hasn't moved over time. So I think it's more of a drag on that. But there is some compatibilities and some features that you wouldn't want to wait too long for that. So
cool.
Yep.
All right, good answer. All right, so final question, and we'll close with Charlene's great question here, and I'll do a quick context to a question I got earlier. With 850 users, would it benefit me to also subscribe them to EMS?
I think for the security aspects, for the extra management that's available for Intune, the greater identity management, Microsoft's MFA, I'd say it isn't necessarily based on user count, but absolutely would have benefits from setting that up for increasing security, which is of course becoming more and more important. And with Microsoft continuously improving the security features and stature of Azure, they're about to become the world's largest security company when you actually look at the acquisitions and the features and functions that they're integrating into their platform. There absolutely is value to that. But again, as I said before, right tool for the job. So I'd love to help you figure that out. So.
Cool. All right. And then there was an earlier question from David. Yeah. So to answer your question, David, yeah, we were talking about OST and non-persistent VDI, and we were talking about different ways we could tackle that. One of the ways was potentially leveraging a product called FS Logics, and that will help alleviate some of the OST pain of non-persistent scenarios. So if you want to, get any more information on that, definitely reach out to myself, and we can talk further on that. And XenTegra also does a lot of work with FS Logics down in the land of Oz, and they know it inside and out as well. So cool. All right. So again, just to recap, we're coming to the top of the hour. I want to respect everybody's time. You had myself, Pete Downing, and Trevor Mansell from XenTegra. Definitely jot down our emails if you have any questions. We try to answer them. If I don't, I always tell people, if I don't answer in 24 hours, don't hesitate to give me a nudge. I get a lot of emails. And then also from XenTegra, we have Jody and Andy. So definitely note, these guys down, and they're our core go-to partner around FastTrack and Office 365. And we're looking forward to working with these guys very closely in the coming years. So with that, we're going to exit out, and I'm going to say thank you for joining us for our webinar Wednesdays. The next topic coming up is going to be Uber Agent, and I'm going to be putting that out in the next day or so, so watch for that. And we have some really cool webinars coming up. After that, we got Secure Envoy. We're working on a Nutanix one. I'm going to do another What's New with Citrus Cloud. So we have a lot of cool topics coming up. So definitely subscribe to our channel, and we'll keep you in the know on cool webinars. So with that, thanks everybody for joining, and have a great day. And thank you, Jody, Andy, and Trevor for joining us today as well. So have a great day, everybody, and see you guys on the flip side.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Thanks, guys.